At 1:30, a reminder of our top story. Russia remembers. World leaders have gathered in Moscow to mark the end of the Second World War. That's all from the 1 o'clock news this lunchtime, so it's goodbye from me. We now join the BBC's news teams across the United Kingdom. Goodbye.
Good afternoon. Just when you thought it was safe to turn your televisions on again, we're back with more election results. This time it's the race for council seats, all 582 of them on 26 local councils. On the wider front, David Trimble took his formal farewell from the Ulster Unionist leadership this morning at a news conference at the party's East Belfast headquarters.
I've had a good innings, time-wise. I think I've had a good innings in terms of what we managed to do. And what I said at the count is still my core view of the matter. I'm proud of what we did.
So David Trimble's out. Peter Hay, the new Secretary of State, is in town this afternoon for initial talks. So we'll keep an eye on all that while concentrating on telling you who's winning and losing the council seats. Will the political pattern that emerges be any different from the Westminster election? The results are flowing pretty freely at the moment. As I speak, 120 councillors have been elected, some old faces, some new. We'll meet plenty of them as the day progresses.
And I'm back again with our political editor Mark Devonport and Dr. Sidney Elliott from Queen's University. Together, we'll be attempting to keep you up to speed with how the candidates and their parties are faring and suggesting what it's likely to mean for you in your council area.
And if you want to study those results at your computer screen, you can find them on our website, www.bbc.co.uk/vote2005. They're also on CFAX pages 160 and 170. As well as keeping you up to date with the latest news from Election 05, we want to hear what you think. You can email us at politicsni@bbc.co.uk or text us at 81771. You can see those details on the screen. But before all that, let's have a look at some of the day's news. David Trimble says the Ulster Unionist Party has a huge task rebuilding itself after its electoral defeats. He was speaking publicly for the first time since he announced his resignation at the weekend. His party lost 4 of their 5 Westminster seats, including Mr Trimble's own constituency of Upper Bann. While having no regrets over the Good Friday Agreement, Mr Trimble does regret not stepping down as party leader a year earlier.
The man on the street will say I should have played harder in some of the negotiations that we had post the agreement. And maybe, one makes judgments at the times, and there may be something in that. The one thing that I would say that as I stand here today is that I did at times after the Assembly election in 2003 think about whether or not I should have resigned then as leader, and that is one regret. I think it might have been better for the party had I resigned, say, early in 2004, but there you are.
And we'll hear more from that news conference and no doubt about David Trimble when we look at how the local government election results are going in detail in a few minutes' time. That counting began this morning and dozens of councillors have already been elected. We've been looking at some of the key battlegrounds, and Julian O'Neill's report begins at the contest in the biggest council, Belfast.
This is a more complex count than Friday's Westminster poll and will last 2 days. Almost 600 seats are being contested on 26 councils. The Upper Falls ward in Belfast was among the first to post results, where Sinn Féin, as expected, topped the poll.
Our vote has increased from 68 to 75% in the Upper Falls ward, which is a good, significant vote, a confidence booster for all within Sinn Féin, the Upper Falls ward.
And within unionism, the DUP was stealing an early march on its rivals.
It's quite clear that in North Belfast, the Old Park area, and it will be the same in the other areas, that the DUP has really become the voice of unionism and that the Ulster Unionist Party is almost decimated.
Coleraine, like everywhere else, started vote counting on the stroke of 9. But here, like everywhere else, it will take transfers to determine the final makeup of the council chamber. In Londonderry, it was a case of picking up where they left off when another Durkin got elected. This time it was the SDLP leader's nephew, who is also called Mark. Here in Omagh, progress was slower than in some other areas, but by 1 o'clock, the picture across Northern Ireland saw around 100 councillors across the finish line. Back at Belfast City Hall, the DUP leaders stopped in for a photo call just before lunchtime. Turnout so far at this election is 61%, but this could be the last time we elect to so many councils. A big shake-up in local government will see the number reduced radically. Julian O'Neill, BBC Newsline.
And in just a few moments' time, we'll bring you all the details from our reporters who are live at the big counts. Other news, cannabis with a street value of £750,000 was recovered by drug squad officers in Stonyford near Lisburn yesterday afternoon. 3 men were arrested. Hotel owners have welcomed a University of Ulster decision to rethink the location of its hotel and tourism courses. As our education correspondent Maggie Taggart reports, the move to Portrush 3 years ago was described as a disaster and was followed by a slump in the number of student applications.
The decision to move hospitality, tourism and leisure courses to the old catering college in Portrush drew an outcry from the industry, which set up an action group to fight it. They preferred the Jordanstown campus, which is closer than Portrush to the large hotels and would make student access easier. The university went ahead with the move, and the House of Commons was told recently that student numbers had slumped in response. The university says it's now to review the location of the courses, saying there's been a national downturn in recruitment for hotel and tourism courses. One of Northern Ireland's foremost hotel owners has welcomed the university's decision.
It's very, very sad for the industry because it's a time when the needs for management skills in the industry have been never greater. And so I welcome this review because it gives the opportunity maybe for the university to admit that they made a mistake and now to set the record straight and begin to take the steps that they need to do to put a proper infrastructure and provision in place that'll meet the needs of the industry.
In 2002, a merger of the catering college and the university was approved, but the minister distanced herself from the by then controversial issue of where it should be.
The decision on location is entirely for the university and is not my decision. My decision is only on the merger.
The university says it hasn't decided where to put the hotel and tourism courses, but a decision will be made in the near future. It says it continually reviews both the content and location of courses to meet the needs of the sector. Maggie Taggart, BBC Newsline.
Portadown Football Club is still celebrating its Irish Cup success. The team were comfortable 5-1 winners over Larne on Saturday, but the victory has been tempered by the news that their best player may be about to leave. Here's Austin O'Callaghan.
Winning the Irish Cup is tough enough, but holding on to Vinnie Arkins is going to be the real challenge for Ronnie McFall. After 7 seasons with Portadown, there was a sense on Saturday that this may have been Vinnie's swan song. In a one-sided final, Arkins showed why he's been one of the Irish League's best ever goal scorers. There was no bleating from Larne. Despite the promise of an early goal, they looked lost at Windsor. For Portadown, the question now is, where will Vinnie be next season?
Well, I don't know. I'll have to see, obviously, after what happens tonight, but I've enjoyed myself at this club over the last 8 years, and I have to say, if I do leave, it'll be fond memories with it.
Add to that Gary Hamilton's reported desire to leave Shamrock Park, and Ports may have some reshaping to do if there are going to be more days like this. Austin O'Callaghan, BBC Newsline.
So that contest has been decided, but the result of a lot of others has still to be announced. Noel.
Hi, right you are, Donna. We'll be on air for about an hour now, then we're back on at 4 until tea time, so plenty of time to find out what's happening at all the counts. We have reporters at all of the 26 counts, and we have live outside broadcasts from 6 of the most important. Throughout the day, I'll be joined by guests from the parties in the studio, but before I introduce them, let's catch up with who's in where with Mark.
Thanks very much, Noel. Well, we've got a few figures in, as we were saying, and we've got Sydney and Mark here who've been banging away on their little calculators already, getting some kind of sense of how things are looking. This is the overall state of the parties at this point. And obviously, a lot of seats still to be declared. We've got 145 of the 582 individual members returned. You can see 64 of them DUP, Sinn Féin with 28, the Ulster Unionists with 21, SDLP with 20, Alliance with 7, and there are 5 others who, of course, Mark, this time round are independents.
Indeed, yeah. This is obviously, Mark, showing a sort of a parallel situation to what we saw in the Westminster election results, with the DUP coming through, looking like they'll be the biggest group in terms of local government. They were the second biggest group previously in 2001. There's an early lead for both the DUP and Sinn Féin. The fact that we're in a PR election as opposed to first past the post means that some of the other parties, the Ulster Unionists, the SDLP and Alliance, may claw back some of the lost ground as these counts go on, because that's what it tends to happen in these PR elections, that you get people, say, transferring from their DUP first preference to an Ulster Unionist second preference and so on.
Sydney, here's the share, again, which pretty much mirrors the situation as far as members returned. Now, we need to explain this. This is the first preference vote share, and this is with 48 of the 101 returns for these district electoral areas. So this picture may well change.
It's still not
quite a lot more complicated than the Westminster situation.
Still not half of the 101 district electoral areas in yet, but nevertheless, you are getting virtually a repeat pattern of Friday. Turnout about 63%. One of the interesting things about it is that whether people would vote in the same level that they would have on Friday, and they seem to have done that in local government level.
And this is the change, on the local government elections in 2001.
And in the areas where there is first preference votes available, so in a sense it's showing DUP up 9 and Sinn Féin up 3, and Ulster Unionist down 5, SDLP down 5. And this is, the health warning with that is with the areas that are in so far.
Yes, I mean, all of this could change, and could change significantly. It might not change, of course, but it could change quite a bit. OK, before we hear from some of the count centre, here's the swing. If you were watching on Friday, then you'll be familiar with this graphic. This is the swing from the Ulster Unionist Party, Mark, to the DUP. The orange of the DUP eating into the blue of the Ulster Unionists there, and the swing at this early stage is 7%.
Yeah, I think that's about a 1% down on the swing that we ended up with at the Westminster elections, if my memory serves me right. Yeah, I mean, it's clear that the DUP will be making gains in all sorts of places, looking to increase their numbers in councils, especially in the eastern Northern Ireland, and maybe move some places where they were, like Ards, where they were previously the biggest group, to being in overall control.
Right, and here is the swing on the nationalist side of the House, Sydney, from the SDLP to Sinn Féin. It's 2%. I think it was 2% on Friday, wasn't it?
Reflecting Friday. And it's saying something to us. As far as the large parties are concerned, the pattern is roughly the same. People are voting the same as they were on Friday. Now, one of the interesting bits will be there are some long-standing candidates in terms of local government who are alliance people. Did the personality vote, did the vote for centre ground hold up, or is it being further choked to death by the larger parties?
And one thing on that topic that we might be able to test, Mark, is the nature of the tactical voting that went on in the Westminster elections, because there will be areas such as the Derry City Council area, which equates to Foyle, where we'll be able to compare Mark Durkan's vote at Westminster with the SDLP vote at the council, or indeed in North Down, where we'll be able to see how much of an Ulster Unionist vote is there in the council and how much did Sylvia Herman rely on alliance votes.
Yeah, and the bottom line is, just in a word, the Ulster Unionists are hoping to have a better day today than they had on Friday.
Well, I think they would hope that PR will kind of cushion the blow that they suffered on Friday, but it will still be a blow, I think.
OK, Mark and Sydney for now. Thank you. Let's hear more from Noel.
Thank you. Let's go straight to our first live outside broadcast. Jim Fitzpatrick is at the Lisburn count. Jim, you have an interesting story of father and son.
Absolutely, Noel. Just first of all, on that point about the DUP swing, 7%, the computer's telling us there at the moment. Well, here in Lisburn, the DUP are confident of taking 12 seats on this council. That was from a base of 5. It looks like a complete reversal of fortunes between the DUP and the Ulster Unionists. They're even saying they might even get up to 14, which is a seat for every candidate that they fielded. And what we've got here is a combination of the DUP factor and the Jeffrey Donaldson factor. Jeffrey Donaldson stood in one ward where last time around there was just one DUP councillor. This time it looks like they've got 3 for definite, possibly even 4. Let Mark put that one into his computer and work out what the swing is here. Now, in terms of the father and son story, You may remember there was a story about David Archer, an Ulster Unionist candidate, who decided to stand down because of various allegations. It was too late to take his name off the ticket. It now looks as if his father, who was a candidate here, a councillor here in Lisburn for 2 terms, is not going to be elected, but he may well. Now, the votes aren't in yet, but the tallies suggest that David Archer Jr. may be elected. What the DUP are saying is, well, this is a decision for the Ulster Unionist Party to make, but should they end up with 12, even 14 councillors, what are the Ulster Unionists going to do with that seat? Is David Archer going to forego his decision to resign and come and take his seat as an Ulster Unionist councillor, or is he going to continue and resign, as he indicated before the election, force a by-election which the DUP are confident they would win, meaning they would have 15 out of 30 councillors here in Lisburn?
OK, Jim, it's getting complicated already. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go now to City Hall. Martina Purdy, our political correspondent, awaits. Martina.
Hi, Noel. Yes, 5 counts going on here today. Upper and Lower Falls, Old Park, Victoria and Pottinger. The Upper Falls count is in. The first person to be elected today was Sinn Féin's Paul Maskey. No change really in Upper Falls. Still 4 Sinn Féin, 1 SDLP, but a change of personality. Sinn Féin's Chrissy McCauley has been replaced by another Chrissy McGilliveen, and Tim Atwood of the SDLP has taken the seat previously held by his brother, the SDLP's Alex Atwood. In Old Park, we seem to have a casualty already. The PUP councillor, Billy Hutchinson, doesn't appear that he is going to be elected, but 3 out of those 6 results are in. Nelson McCausland of the DUP has polled very well, topping the poll. Danny Lavery of Sinn Féin is in, as is his party colleague Margaret McClenaghan. Still waiting to be elected there are Ulster Unionist Fred Cobain, the SDLP's Albin McGuinness, and Sinn Féin's Cara Ní Shúilleann. In Pottinger, it seems we're going to see a swing to the DUP. Sammy Wilson topped the poll there, and he's brought in a new face, May Campbell, a party colleague. And also elected there is the Ulster Unionist Sir Reg MP. But it looks like Margaret Clark's old seat hasn't been successfully defended, and that's going to go to a DUP candidate, probably Margaret McKenzie. Still waiting to be elected there, and hopeful are David Irvine, Billy Hutchinson's colleague of the PUP. Maura Hendren and Deborah Devaney will fight for the last seat. Now, as you'll recall at the last election, Sinn Féin had a breakthrough in Pottinger. Joe O'Donnell was elected in East Belfast. The question is, will Deborah Devaney be able to defend that seat? Some feel that Sinn Féin may not be able to do it, and they may have been harmed by allegations around the McCartney murder and IRA members being involved in that. Finally, Victoria, 5 out of 7 seats in. The Ulster Unionists have polled well. Ian Adamson and his party colleague Jim Rogers, a veteran, they're in, as is Naomi Long of the Alliance Party. And still, the DUP have polled well there. Wallace Brown topped the poll, and he's also been elected, as has the DUP's Robin Newton. So still waiting for 2 other seats in that ward.
Martina, thank you very much indeed. Right, to my studio guests, I'm honoured to have Dermot Nesbitt, of course, who was a junior minister in the Assembly. Patricia Loosley, who is waiting for her count in Lisburn to start this afternoon. Billy Hutchinson, we've just been talking about. We'll hear from you in a minute. Billy, in Old Park. Naomi Long, who is in East Belfast. Congratulations to you. Billy Hutchinson, you're out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I knew that quite early on.
Yeah. Tell us the story of the morning as you discovered your departure was imminent.
Well, obviously, I'd seen whenever they were counting the votes that the DUP were well ahead and that Fred Cobain was sort of double what I had. So I knew even if waiting at transfers wasn't going to do me any good. So, you know, I knew from about 11 o'clock that was it. It was finished, so I was out.
So they've abandoned the PUP for the DUP. Is that what you think has happened?
Well, I mean, I think the DUP have taken the votes, and it was a PUP seat on the Democratic Unionist Party. And I think in this occasion, the Ulster Unionists have benefited from that, because Fred Cobain will get the transfers from the DUP, which is quite strange, but that's where it's going.
Yeah, okay. Naomi Long, not a bad day for Alliance on Friday. What are you hoping for today?
Well, I mean, it was a very good day for us from our own perspective on Friday. Maybe not such a good day overall in politics, but it was certainly a good day for us. I mean, today we already know we've made a gain in Holywood. We're also looking like making a gain in Newton Abbey. So I think Alliance gains seats is going to be something which is going to re-enter the language of politics in Northern Ireland. So we're feeling fairly hopeful.
And Patricia Loosley, again, you had more seats than Sinn Féin in 2001, but do you think you can maintain that lead?
I think we will do okay today.
Swing so far of about 3% to Sinn Féin.
But the day is not over, and it's not over till the last vote is counted. And PR in particular can show up many things. And we've done fairly well. I mean, at the last Westminster election, with the result we thought we would do drastically at local government, but as it turned out, we did quite well and stayed ahead.
Dermot Nesbitt, the formal resignation of David Trimble, of course, you were a faithful Trimbleista or Trimbleite, whatever you want to call it. How are you feeling today?
Well, I watched David this morning and I had great empathy, sympathy, loyalty for David, as you rightly say. But in any conflict, in a very metaphorical sense, those who storm the beaches or those who charge the barricades, they're the ones that take the greatest hits, that suffer the greatest casualties, and that is what David personifies. He took unionism and took Northern Ireland to a place it hasn't been before for a long time. And as a leader of Ulster Unionism, he had a clear vision, a clear direction, a clear purpose that he wanted to see for Northern Ireland, and Northern Ireland at peace and at ease with itself and paramilitarism gone forever. That was his clear purpose. And he has laid the way, I trust, for it to be brought to fruition. It will not be him, but those who follow, especially the DUP who are now in the ascendancy at this time, it will be made much, much easier for them because of what he has done.
Paisley says he beat himself. It was perhaps his lack of vision, his lack of purpose, his inability to communicate that vision. If he had it so clearly, he didn't make it very clear to other people, did he?
Well, that's another point about analysing where it went wrong, which is a different point as to why I perceive what David Trimble's contribution was. Yes, of course we made mistakes, and as David rightly said this morning, more important than the mistakes that we made was that the IRA did not live up to its commitments. I remember in October 2002 going into the Assembly, speaking for the Ulster Unionist Party, looking across at Sinn Féin and saying, "You let us down big time." It was Bertie Ahern who made it very clear that we didn't vote for an armed peace, that you cannot have, and the deal simply was, and it still is there, that we have the workings of democracy with the absence of violence. Okay. I worked the government. I, as a unionist, sat in government with Sinn Féin.
We'll have plenty of time to discuss that in the course of the day. I'm sorry, but I just want a point that David Trimble made. He says he'll treat his successor much better than his predecessors treated him, although that wouldn't be hard, he said. The party has been riven with dishonour and disloyalty. Do you think so?
Yes, that has been his difficulty. There has been too often too many voices speaking with mixed messages, a reluctance to take the central discipline and the ruling of the Ulster Unionist Council. We are a party of rules. The Ulster Unionist Council is the supreme governing body of the party. There were those who would not take that direction, and therefore we found ourselves as a party divided. And a party divided does not succeed. However, opposite to that, if we were divided, yes, the DUP were completely united, but they were united in deception in what they portrayed and also to undermine the Ulster Unionist Party.
Well, you would say that, but we don't have a DUP person here to come back with that. But we will later today. Thank you for the moment very much indeed. Let's now go to Omagh. Rosie Billingham awaits. Rosie, what's exciting in Omagh today?
Well, we've now got 4 councillors elected, 18 to go. Of course, there are 21 seats on this council, and Sinn Féin currently hold 8. They're really pushing the boat out this time. They're going for 11. And of course, if they won those 11 seats, that would give them absolute control of this council. It's thought they may well make 2 gains, and that could be at the expense of the SDLP. Now, looking at the results, first in for Omagh Town, that's one of the 3 areas here. We have Clive McFarlane, the youngest candidate here at 26 of the DUP. He's in. Close behind, Sean Begley of Sinn Féin. Of course, there's Paddy McGowan, the popular independent, and Dr. Jo Deehan of the SDLP. Interesting because last time around, she wasn't in till the very last stage. It's her colleague, the senior SDLP figure, Joe Byrne, who's sitting last. He's seen his first preference vote slashed. Now, it's interesting because, of course, Dr. Jo Deehan had the endorsement of the independent hospital campaigner, Dr. Kieran Deeney, who obviously ran in the Westminster election for West Tyrone. So we may well be seeing here that his endorsement does actually count. The SDLP's decision to run a candidate and not give Dr. Deeney a free run in the Westminster election really split the SDLP councillors apart. 3 supporting Dr. Deeney, saying people before party, 3 towing the line. Of course, now they say that's all behind them, and that once Eugene McMenamin was nominated as the SDLP candidate for West Tyrone, they all supported him. But we may well be seeing the effect, really, of the hospital issue, which is the issue to build the new £175 million acute hospital in Enniskillen and not here in Omagh. So we may well be seeing a fight between the pretender here, which is Martin McColgan of Sinn Féin, Johnny McLaughlin, the Independent, and of course senior SDLP figure Joe Byrne for that last seat in Omagh Town.
OK, Rosie, thank you very much indeed. Let's go straight to Derry. Kieran Turish awaits a tale of two Durkins, possibly, Kieran.
It certainly is. Know more about that in a moment. As you can see, the count is well underway here in Derry City Council, and we have a few results in already. As expected, no surprise here, Gregory Campbell of the DUP has topped the poll in the Waterside with 1,521 votes. As I say, no surprise. The quota is actually 1,175. Gregory Campbell, of course, re-elected in East Londonderry and Westminster on Friday. Also elected in the Waterside for the SDLP is Gerard Diver. Now, he got 1,508 votes. He's a youth worker and is one of the new generation of the SDLP. We have a third councillor in Waterside as well. That's Joe Miller of the DUP. Again, no surprise. He's very popular at a grassroots level and is a real bread and butter man and gets the votes out each election. Counting, as you've hinted there at, is also underway in Northland. Now, really, the big story here is, of course, the stunning performance of Mark Durkan, and it's not Mark Durkan, the SDLP leader, but Mark Henry Durkan, his nephew, and he has done really, really well, performed extremely well, so name recognition has obviously been pulling in the votes for him. He topped the poll with 2,369. Now, that's way in excess of the quota of 1,274. The SDLP will probably be delighted that in his first election he has topped the poll and got himself elected, but they might be just a wee bit worried about vote management and how that'll affect their other candidates.
Kieran,
talking about keeping it in the family, Shauna Hume, John Hume's niece, has just been elected as well in the last few moments.
Kieran, would Mark H. Durkan accept that some of his huge vote there is a result of possibly mistaken identity?
Yes, he would, because I've just done an interview with him 10 minutes ago and I asked him about that, and he said the name helps, and I think inherent in that answer was the fact that people may have been confused. They may have thought that his uncle was running.
OK. Kieran, we'll talk to you later. Thank you very much indeed. Tara Mills is in Coleraine. Tara, what's up?
Well, Noel, I think the picture here is pretty much what's happening elsewhere, but overall I think to a lesser extent the SDLP have lost one seat to Sinn Féin so far, and the DUP have gained one at the expense of the Ulster Unionists. What's interesting about the Sinn Féin seat is, though, that it's gone to Billy Leonard, and you'll remember he's the controversial character, a former Orange man and former RUC reservist, who was then an SDLP councillor and then last year defected to Sinn Féin. So this result for him, he's the first ever Sinn Féin councillor to be elected onto Coleraine Borough Council, and it's certainly an endorsement of his position. Ironically, he was the election agent for John Dallett here, and it was transfers from John Dallett that actually got him elected. John Dallett for the SDLP was elected on the second stage, but with a reduced count, 40% down on what he got last year. In terms of the battle for unionist votes here, just 5 DUP at the moment, 2 for the Ulster Unionists. Overall, the Ulster Unionists have been in control here basically since the council began, and the DUP are hot on their heels, hoping to take that majority, but by the looks of things it may end up actually being neck and neck.
OK, Tara, thank you very much indeed. Conor McCauley is in Newry. Conor, it's a tale of family unity in Newry to some extent, isn't it?
More of that in a moment, Noel, but I can tell you first of all there are 30 seats up for grabs here, and I suppose the big question here is whether or not Sinn Féin can build on the representation they already have. They're already the biggest party here. They had 13 councillors elected the last time out. Now, one of those councillors subsequently left the party in a row over the direction of republicanism, but Sinn Féin is fairly happy it can regain that seat for the party, and they also have designs on a number of others, including one here in Newry Town where they think they can sneak a seat from the SDLP, and one in Crotleave where they reckon that one of the independents may be vulnerable. There's also talk to Sinn Féin may make a clean sweep of the Slieve-Gullion ward. They have 4 of the 5 seats there. They're looking at a possibility of sneaking the 5th, although we won't know that until later today when they start the Slieve-Gullion count. I can tell you we've had some returns here. Jackie Patterson, who's a former council employee for Newry and Moore District Council, I think he worked for the council for something like 25 years, has topped the poll. He's now into his 3rd term of office, and also Charlie Casey of Sinn Féin is also in, and that's where we are at the moment here in Newry and Moore.
Okay, Conor, thank you very much indeed. Now let's just return to my guests. Just to stay with David Trimble for a moment. Billy Hutchison, one of the iconic images of the talks process was the small loyalist parties and the Ulster Unionist parties striding into Stormont. You remember they called it reservoir prods. What's your view of the legacy of David Trimble?
Well, I mean, I don't think anybody can take away from what David Trimble tried to do, and I think his difficulty was communicating that sort of vision, and I think he certainly didn't communicate it in his own party. And I think that was his downfall.
What was his failure there? How precisely did that
Well, I mean, I
happen?
think it, in many ways, I mean, those of us who knew David Trimble would know that he probably wasn't a great communicator, that he probably had a cabal of people who he trusted, and he didn't talk to people outside of that until he was ready to actually go. And I think in many ways, that sort of crucified him within his own party. People felt they weren't kept up with what was going on. But at the same time, I think people need to recognise that he has made large differences to society. And I think that we need to recognise that. I wouldn't criticise him for what he done or what he didn't do. I think that he did it for the reasons that were very positive and very good. But unfortunately for him and for the Ulster Unionists, it hasn't worked out.
And do you think he's made it easy for the DUP?
Well, I mean, I think the DUP, have got all these votes now, and they have to decide which way they're going to go. And they could decide that they play stalemate or that they actually move this thing forward. I think they're in a very strong position. I mean, I don't think that the Good Friday Agreement will be changed, but I think that the DUP will be able to argue that they got things changed. But I mean, there's no real difference from what Trimble was trying to do, with the exception that the DUP now have not only their party behind them, but they've also got the public out there behind them, and that's quite clear, not only from Friday's election, but from today's. We were talking here about burying the dead and collecting the bins, and people still voted in that same way.
Okay, lots more chat to come. Let's go and see what the figures are doing. Mark.
No, thanks very much. We're going to take a look at 2 council areas in a little bit of detail now for just a moment or two. Belfast, of course, the largest of the 26 councils. So, Mark Devonport and Sydney Elliott are going to talk us through some of these figures. Mark, this is Belfast, 15 just of the 51 councillors returned, and Sinn Féin riding pretty high at this stage. Early stage, it has to be said.
That's because one of the district electoral areas that's reported has been, I think, the Upper Falls,
yep.
And so they've got a fair few people in there. Having said that, of course, Sinn Féin were the largest group on Belfast City Council, so they would expect to get a fair few here. The question here is that what will happen to the fine balance at Belfast City Council? It's balanced between, I think it's something like 23, 24 unionists, 23, 24 nationalists, with the 3 alliance councillors holding the balance in the middle. Will that survive, or could this tip one way or the other? Maybe more likely towards the unionists than anything, but possibly also just remain balanced.
Yeah, and of course the Alliance Party held the balance of power Sydney last time round, but no councillors returned for that party yet. But it's a lot to do with the geographical way in which votes are counted in this system.
Yes, and say the ones that are being counted today, we've already heard that say we're getting Upper and Lower Falls, we're getting Old Park, we're getting a number of the ones where they might be a little bit more favourable to Sinn Féin in that respect. Share of the vote really is...
Well, let's take a look at share. We'll move the graphics on, and again, Sinn Féin there with 33%, DUP 25%, 16 Ulster Unionists, 12 SDLP, 9% for the Alliance Party, but no members yet.
No, but still there's time for that to happen, to change. The Alliance had a very key position in the last council with only 3 seats in it, and the balance of the 2 blocks, 23 and 25, it meant that they were able to determine, in effect, really, who became Lord Mayor for at least 2 of the years, and they bagged, shall we say, the Lord Mayorship in the final year before the new election. So in a sense, it's not always about big blocks and numbers. Small numbers, councillors could actually determine things too.
This is the change, Mark, on the local elections in 2001. The turnout down 5%, interestingly, and 4 of the 9 areas returned at this stage. The first preferences of 4 of those 9 areas returned.
We can see those gains from the DUP, that they would be particularly happy if they gain, say, in the Pottinger ward at the expense of Sinn Féin. There's all this talk about whether Sinn Féin will hold on to that seat that Joe O'Donnell had.
Yeah.
He ran into his own problems in terms of planning permission at his house, and then Sinn Féin as a party ran into some problems over the McCarthy killing. So the DUP looking to make gains, and if they can tip it away from the balanced situation towards a unionist majority, they obviously would be delighted, but it's still...
And you could say also in that ward, say, for example, while the McGuinness Bar is in another ward, Pottinger contains Short Strand, and that's where the McCartney family live. So in a sense, if you're looking for a ward which might damage Sinn Féin, the loss of a seat here might be something that people might look towards.
Okay, let's just look at the swing here, and we like this graphic. Let's take a look. It's 4% Ulster Unionists to the DUP at this early stage. Again, that's not so bad in Belfast. It's worse elsewhere. It's worse across Northern Ireland.
Yeah, we began with 4% in West Belfast yesterday, or on Friday, and we ended up with about 8% overall across Northern Ireland.
Okay, that's the situation as far as the Unionists are concerned. Within nationalism, a 1% swing SDLP to Sinn Féin, which is interesting given that many of the returns we've had so far are from nationalist areas.
Yeah, well, the SDLP are holding their own a little bit better than maybe they would have been given credit for before these elections. For instance, Sinn Féin had high hopes of having a clean sweep up in the Upper Falls there, but Tim Attwood, taking over from his brother Alex, held his own.
Right, okay, let's go to Lisburn, and we heard from Jim a little bit earlier. Interesting things happening in Lisburn. There's the tally board at this stage. 8 of the 30 members of Lisburn City Council returned, 6 DUP, 1 Alliance, 1 Ulster Unionist. Mark?
Well, on the Unionist side previously in Lisburn, the Ulster Unionists were very much in the lead, something like 12-7, I think. And clearly there was room for a lot of change here, because that reflected Jeffrey Donaldson being the local MP, and actually quite a few of the councillors were Trimbleites. Now Jeffrey Donaldson made his move, and what we're looking at here, I think, is the Donaldson coattail effect. 51%.
And those figures are quite startling, really, aren't they? It's almost double the DUP, almost twice the percentage of the Ulster Unionists at this stage, with 3 out of the 5 areas returning their first preferences.
Yeah, there were stories during the campaign that when some of the Ulster Unionists realised, which district electoral area Jeffrey Donaldson was standing in, they all started sort of fleeing that area. So you can see that they knew that the writing was on the wall.
Okay, let's just look at the change, and well, that pretty much mirrors what you've said. DUP up 24%, Ulster Unionist Party down 16%.
And obviously we're also looking for this particularly interesting situation that if one of the Ulster Unionists to get elected is indeed, as Jim Fitzpatrick was suggesting earlier on, David Archer Jr., we could potentially be looking at a council by-election immediately after that, which on the evidence of those figures might possibly be in the DUP's interest to actually push it to an election.
Yeah, the most vacancies nowadays in district councils are filled by co-option rather than by-election. But you can imagine in a situation where control of the council was concerned, there would be an opposition to it, and you would run naturally to a by-election.
I think this is quite a telling picture. Let's look at the swing here within the Lisburn area. 20% from the Ulster Unionists to the DUP.
Well, that shows, obviously Jeffrey Donaldson's in there as a council candidate, so he's taken his personal vote into this council swing, so it really does show.
It's a clever tactic on the part of the DUP, isn't it?
Absolutely, because then they hope that people will transfer on down, and they're prepared to put their big guns in.
And it is a common one that DUP actually practice, that you will find also an MP still standing in local government elections, whereas, say, you might imagine, one office, one man, one office, and that doesn't happen. But when it comes to the elections, the personality vote actually does translate, and you can maximise your position from that point of view.
Okay, just a quick word of the overall state of the parties, Mark. 155 of the 582 returned. DUP, Sinn Féin, Ulster Unionists there with 25, 23 SDLP, Alliance with 7. Here is the share across the 26 council areas. 32% the DUP, there Sinn Féin in second place, then the Ulster Unionists, the SDLP and Alliance. And finally, Mark, just a quick word on the change.
Well, we see there the Ulster Unionists and the SDLP down. In previous PR elections, they've tended to, catch up and even overtake the other parties, the DUP and Sinn Féin in the later stages. But this time, it doesn't look like they'll be able to do it.
I think the pattern's set. We have about a quarter of the seats now filled, and the pattern looks as if it's going to follow that of Westminster on Friday.
Yeah, turnout down 5%. It was 8% for Westminster, it's 5%. As far as the locals are concerned, we'll discuss why that might be the case a little bit later perhaps, but before that, here's Noel.
Mark, thank you. And don't forget our tally box in the bottom of your screen, and that'll keep you right up to date. As Sydney says, just over a quarter of the seats filled so far. Let's go to Belfast City Hall and Sammy Wilson, who has been re-elected to the council. Mr. Wilson, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. If this earpiece doesn't keep popping out here, Noel, well, I'll try and keep a finger on it.
Keep your finger on it.
Just as we keep our finger on the pulse, I'll keep my finger
exactly.
on the earpiece.
We won't think it's some strange ritual. We'll assume it's faulty technology.
It's not a special...
The reality has come true. You're going to face this terrible conflict of interest, aren't you, between Belfast and East Antrim, your new parliamentary seat. Have you resolved in your own mind how you're going to fix that?
No conflict of interest at all. In fact, as I've been going about to City Hall here today, I've met many of my constituents who actually work for Belfast City Council who have congratulated me on the victory on Friday and then again today. There's a lot of complementarity, of course, between the two constituencies. Don't forget, about half of the people in East Antrim probably work in Belfast. They travel into Belfast in the morning, and therefore the transport links between the two areas are very, very important, and something which, as a councillor, I will have a say on, and as an MP, I'll have a say on as well.
I know, but this is a question I know you've been asked before in this campaign, but I mean, what happens when a big employer comes along and says, well, we can't decide whether we want to go to East Belfast or East Antrim? What are you going to say?
Well, probably as a councillor, I'm not going to have a great deal of influence.
Oh, you underestimate yourself, Mr. Wilson.
Well, I never underestimate.
I was going to say it's a rare occasion.
But you know, in a case like that, and given the fact that people in East Antrim also work in Belfast, I suppose the best way of looking at that, and any employer will look at it in this way anyway, is what is most commercially sustainable. And if the jobs come to East Antrim, some people from North Belfast may well move into East Antrim to work there. If they come to Belfast, some people from East Antrim will move into Belfast to work in them. So I really don't see that there is that much of a conflict at all.
All right. Let's just look at today. Very early stages of the count today, of course, but a similar trend emerging to that which emerged on Friday.
Yeah. It certainly seems that way. I know that in my own constituency of Pottinger, we're picking up an extra seat. We'll take that from the Ulster Unionists. In Victoria, we're picking up an extra seat, and we'll take that from the Ulster Unionists. And that seems to be the trend across. In fact, I think if anything, we probably have underestimated the degree of swing, and we're probably going to gift the Ulster Unionists a few seats and help them out in some areas.
So what, because of poor planning?
No, because
poor vote management?
Not because of poor vote management at all, probably because we were a bit modest in our expectations as to just how much the swing had been towards us, and we may well find in a couple of areas, certainly in one area in Belfast, we might have taken an extra seat had we put up an extra candidate, but you know, that's sometimes you get surprised in elections, and at least the surprise this time has been a pleasant one.
David Trimble, of course, formally resigning this morning. What's your farewell to him?
Well, I think that all we can say to David is that you brought it on yourself, and unfortunately, on bringing this disaster on your own head, you brought a disaster upon Northern Ireland as well, and there's a lot of debris which we have got to pick our way through over the next months, but we'll do our best to do that.
Disaster is putting it a bit strongly, surely. I mean, most people agree that Northern Ireland's in a much better position now than it was when he took over as leader.
Well, you tell that to some of the policemen who have been displaced as a result of the patent proposals. Tell that to people whose schools have been affected by the years that Martin McGuinness was Education Minister. Tell that to people who find themselves faced with huge rate bills because of the costly administration in terms of extra departments to ensure that Sinn Féin got a couple of ministers and all of the additional cross-border bodies which cost millions of pounds a year. The people of Northern Ireland are paying this for David Trimble's disastrous negotiations out of their pockets, and they're also paying for it by the levels of low-level crime on the streets, and the fact that we now have a police force which has been decimated as a result of the agreement which he negotiated.
And what about the easy political ride that you now have thanks to all the hard work that David Trimble did?
Well, I don't think we do have an easy political ride. We've got a lot of hard ground to claim back because, of course, there has been so much lost, and what we have said to people in Northern Ireland, we will seek to claw back as much as we can. We'll be honest with them. for the things that we can't claw back, and we will seek to try and get direct rule made as accountable as possible in the future.
Okay, Mr. Wilson, you're coming into the studio for our later programme.
Yes.
I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you very much for the
thank you.
moment. Let's go to Coleraine. Billy Leonard has just been elected, the first Sinn Féin councillor in Coleraine. Mr. Leonard, you have made a long and interesting journey from the police force to Sinn Féin councillor, and a first in the area, as I say. In a few words, we've heard a lot about you, but we rarely see you. So just tell us in a few sentences what that journey has been.
That journey is, Noel, really about questioning identity. It's been about being born into a unionist British identity, questioning that over a considerable number of years in my early 20s, and for a long time already being a very contented Irishman. You politicise that later on, and then in terms of post-Good Friday Agreement politics, you get dissatisfaction with one party and its commitments. I made a big decision to move to Sinn Féin in 2004.
We should say that you moved to the SDLP first, of course, where you were. You worked very closely with John Dallett for many years, and he felt personally very betrayed at your departure for Sinn Féin. Do you regret that?
Whatever John's opinion about sort of his personal feelings, I have always stressed that this is not about personalities, that politics is much bigger than that, Noel. Politics is about the vision and the strategy and the commitment. So I reached a point where I had to decide, was I going to spend the rest of my political life trying to sort of engender that change within the SDLP, or was I going to commit the next 10, 15 years of my political life to a party that I did think at this stage, at this juncture, had that vision, strategy and commitment. I made my decision. It was a massive decision, and I'm already on record as saying that, but I have no regrets. So if John personalises it, that's a commentary on him. I'm not. I'm out doing my best for Sinn Féin, and obviously the project that Sinn Féin is embarking upon.
And how do you reconcile in yourself now belonging to a political grouping that is Republicanism, which endorsed and carried out the killing of police officers who were still are, of course, your former colleagues? How do you personally reconcile that?
Because I would put it into the context of conflict, and I would put the efforts of Sinn Féin into this present context of trying to resolve, to transform, to manage conflict, to move forward. And every main political tradition in Ireland has had connections with, been born out of violence. What we're now embarking upon is making sure that we deal with politics as opponents, not enemies. And as an Irishman, as somebody who wants a united Ireland, I can reconcile that now at this point, at this time in our history, that Sinn Féin is committed to making the peace process work, taking the decisions that it's got to take, and therefore we are in conflict transformation mode. That's an essential ingredient and an essential context to understand our present-day politics, whether you're examining the big constitutional issue or whether you're doing grassroots politics right across the board. And I must stress, Noel, that Sinn Féin in this area is already representing people right across the board on common, local and civic issues, and we will continue to do so.
And what are your views on the IRA, its past and future? Was it right to kill those former colleagues of yours?
I think in terms of conflict, you don't get down to the normal rights or wrongs, but what we've got is the most important point.
That's an easy way out of the question, of course.
Is the Adams statement. Is the Adams statement that encouraging the IRA to look at its present position, and then we're going to obviously wait to see what the reaction is. And in the context of what you're trying to come back at me, it's not about easiness. It's about recognising reality of state violence, paramilitary violence from different groups of paramilitary, collusion, etc., and the many other types of violence. So therefore, we do genuinely, Noel, have got to build a context where we're no longer enemies, but we are political opponents.
OK, Mr. Leonard, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Omagh Barry McElduff of Sinn Féin, who's not had to make such an interesting journey as Mr. Leonard, but no doubt you want to congratulate your colleague in Coleraine.
I am delighted that Billy has got elected. Congratulations, Billy. And I find that he's the most interesting interviewee, real substance in what he says, and good luck to Billy on Coleraine Council.
Well, let's see if we can get some equal substance out of you, Councillor McElduff. What's the situation so far in Omagh?
Omagh Town and West Tyrone first count announcements have just been made there, Noel. Bit of DUP poll topping here. Sinn Féin obviously scoring well as well. I myself and Sean Begley have been formally elected in the recent past there. We're not going for poll topping headlines, rather we're going for seats, and we're emerging from this particular council with 8 seats and we would like to build on 8 out of 21 seats. That's our objective.
Would you like to tell me what target you've set yourself?
Well, you know, notionally you'd like to rise till either 9, 10 or 11. I think the 11 will be elusive, Noel. That said, we're holding out hope right to the end of increasing our figure from 8 till anything between 9 and 10.
And the message that will send to the electors of Omagh will be what?
Well, essentially in County Tyrone, if you take 4 councils, Omagh included, Noel, Sinn Féin has long since been the largest single party throughout the 4 councils in County Tyrone, and nationalists in Tyrone speak with great confidence. There's a desire and a demand for political change and for a united Ireland, and that's something we're very unapologetic about. And also we work extremely hard on the ground on local issues.
The local issue, the burning local issue, of course, in Omagh being the hospital. Why will people not just accept that they've lost that war?
Well, we won't accept that, Noel, because we fundamentally believe that the decision taken was wrong. I myself have been centrally involved in the hospital campaign, indeed have chaired task team meetings of the hospital campaign every Friday morning for the last 4 years. This is a big issue, as indeed are the education and library board cuts. And there are other issues as well, so health and education, certainly major issues in Omagh.
And what would be the potential future for Omagh Council in the reorganisation of local government?
Well, I think Omagh would be well placed. It's the county town of Tyrone. I think in any new configuration, Omagh can expect to feature well. This is a large town where there are many public sector jobs. We'd like to see increasingly the decentralisation of government jobs, and I believe that Omagh has a strong role to play as part of the greater northwest of Ireland. But certainly it's the county town of Tyrone, and we aim to take it forward.
So your message to the other councils which would be subsumed into you would be, well, guys, you know, tough.
No, what we would say is that we have work to do. The Tyrone identity is important, I would suggest. We have work to do to ensure that we have proper health service, proper education services, and to work with the people. Democracy at local level is very, very important.
Brian McElduff, thank you very much indeed. Straight away to Belfast. Ian Adamson has been re-elected. Mr. Adamson, congratulations to you.
Thank you very much, Noel.
A word about your erstwhile party leader who formally resigned this morning.
Well, I was a good friend of David Trimble, and I think he worked well for the whole of Northern Ireland. He put Northern Ireland on the world stage in a way that no one had done before him. So I'm particularly sad that he has resigned.
Who do you fancy as leader?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what will happen, but I feel that perhaps a triumvirate might be put in place. Triumvirate, of course, maybe including a lady or two as well, and that these people could meet together and could form some sort of policy for the development of a new programme for Ulster Unionism.
You're a scholar of language, of course, Councillor Adamson. What would the word be for a triumvirate which had a woman in it?
Well, I suppose
we'll have to work on an Ulster Scots one, perhaps.
That's right.
But seriously, for a moment, I mean, you think it's too big a job for one person, or there just isn't a single person who has what it takes at the moment?
No, I believe there are people there who would be able to hold the job down really well, but I think at a moment of crisis it's perhaps to have several people involved so that they can work out a strategy together and go from there. I think that there's a lot of wisdom within the Ulster Unionist Party, and that the more people can be brought together to decide in the future, the better.
What's your priority for your next term in Belfast?
Well, I think waste management in Belfast is a huge priority for us, and also the development of the Titanic Quarter. I've always been interested, as you know, in the Titanic as such, but I believe that the Titanic Quarter will develop into an area really of prime significance for Northern Ireland, for the world in general, both in terms of cultural tourism and economic development for Belfast.
Mr. Adamson, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you indeed.
Return to
Thank
my
you.
guests. A triumvirate woman. How's that? No, never mind. Okay, Naomi Long, you'll be walking those corridors, of course, for another 4 years or so. What's your priority going to be? You think waste management is a big one?
Well, it is in terms of the financial implications that it holds for the ratepayers of Belfast. There's no doubt about it. I think one of the other major implications we're going to have to look at is what impact that's going to have on, for example, our leisure services programme. And we need to look at that very carefully, how we're going to deal with the leisure centres we have and the legacy that we have to deal with there. But I think there are other issues that bother people as well, issues like planning. I mean, those are some of the ones that actually come to us most consistently as elected representatives, and I think that those are going to be a priority. I want to see planning reformed, both the way it's handled in planning service and also the way the consultation goes on with councils and with local representatives.
That was one of your babies in Stormont, of course, wasn't it? The environment. So what is up the planning sleeve, do you think, should we ever get devolution
Well, I'm
back
not going
again?
to answer that question. Let me address something.
Oh, please answer.
No, I will in a
no.
moment. I want time, and I'll tell you why, and I want
Yeah.
brief time on this live programme. You cut me off whenever I said something about the reception of the DUP. You said, but they're not here. You would say that anyway. You allowed Samuel Wilson 3 answers.
Yeah.
And in each of those answers, he denigrated the UUP. So let me make 3 points about that.
Briefly,
first
if you
of all.
can, because we're running
3
out of
points.
time.
No,
Yeah.
I want the same time as Samuel Wilson, if you don't mind.
You'll be here all afternoon, Mr. Nesbitt, so bear that in
So
mind.
are you going to come back to me then?
Yes, of course, lots of times.
Well, then let me
You've just wasted half a minute.
No,
Let's
I haven't
go.
wasted half a minute. I want to see balance in this programme. First of all, the first point I make, very clearly, this bit about deception and truth. Ian Paisley gave a very clear answer to Mark Devonport sitting across the studio, that the reason his party had to sit in the studios with Sinn Féin was because this BBC would not provide money for separate studios. That is untrue. Your own head, Anne Carragher, has endorsed that position. Second point, the DUP said they were going to have a new agreement, a fair deal, get rid of the Belfast Agreement. They've bought totally into the Belfast Agreement in every respect. Indeed, they've even gone beyond the Belfast Agreement, because the Belfast Agreement merely said we were to consider, for example, an All-Ireland Civic Forum. The DUP is now committed to supporting that. So they've gone even further than the Belfast Agreement from a point of view of the All-Ireland dimension. Third point, and you'll remember this point, because the other week in Hearts and Minds, you were interviewing Peter Robinson, and he called you into check by saying he got the word activity, not the word criminality, and he said to you, but activity is more embracing than criminality. I'm sure you remember that point he made. Well, let's go back to the joint declaration, where, and this is where I finish, where it stated very clearly there was to be an immediate, full and permanent cessation of all paramilitary activity. That was there before the DUP came in the ascendancy. And when you look at their Devolution Now document of February 2004, the Blair necessities were all there as a result of what the Ulster
But people
Unionist
all
Party
voted
had done.
DUP, not Ulster Unionists, bottom line.
I accept
think
that.
You've had your time. I won't even ask
But
you
I'm
about
just
planning
trying to
now.
say-
Maybe ask you later. Yes, let's just go back to the Alliance Party. I mean, you lost out in the 2001 elections, but still maintained the balance of power. And Sydney was saying that it's not necessarily numbers that create power in a PR system. So, do you think you managed that balance well?
Yes,
There's a
I
lot of
think-
controversy about Sinn Féin, Lord Mayor, etc., etc.
Of course there was controversy, and I think that that's understandable, because what we saw in City Hall was a unionist bloc which was unprepared, despite talking I suppose softly in public, unprepared to even support a nationalist from the SDLP for Lord Mayor. When you're confronted with that kind of division, of course it creates controversy when you follow your programme, which is to deliver power sharing. We have made our position clear, we have stuck by it, the electorate have judged it and have judged it favourably. And so I think that, I mean, as far as we're concerned, our consciences are clear.
Okay, that's good. We'll come back to you again. Michael Brown awaits in Belfast City Hall again. Mr. Brown, you're elected.
Yes, no.
Congratulations.
Thanks very much.
What are your priorities going to be in City Hall?
Well, I think there's a number, and some of the other interviewees have already touched them. Obviously, for Belfast, waste management is going to become a big thing over the next 4 years. We've also got to look at the implications of the local government review, the review of public administration. And how that's going to impact on local authorities such as Belfast too. So,
I mean, for people who are not so intimately involved in all this, how will it affect Belfast? Clearly, Belfast's not going to be losing anything.
Well, it's not necessarily a case of what's going to be lost. It's in terms of the real debate. I think will centre on responsibility that's going to be drawn towards local authorities. And I think the consequences and the implications could be very serious for councils such as Belfast. So yes, while councils, other councils across the north could lose out. In terms of Belfast, we mightn't see a great change. Though it's still a matter for debate, but we mightn't see a great change in terms of the electoral boundary and the size of the council. But I think the big thing for Belfast ratepayers and for people who vote for the makeup of Belfast City Council is the responsibility that the council will assume, the responsibilities that councillors will take on board. Okay. Now, as I say, that's obviously a matter effectively for the next term, but the real debate as to what's gained, what's lost for all local administrations will be conducted heavily through the course of this present term.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Bryan. Let's go to Omagh and we go to Tom Buchanan, who's been elected for the DUP. Congratulations to you.
Thank you. Sure.
We last met on the BBC Newsline Roadshow when we were dealing with the bread and butter issues. What are your bread and butter issues in Omagh? Are you still going to be fighting for this hospital?
Yes, well, one of the main issues for the people of West Tyrone is proper acute health services in this area. That's something that we will continue to focus on and fight for the people of West Tyrone.
But we know that they're starting to clear the site in Enniskillen. I mean, people surely in Omagh, and I'm going to put this to lots of people in Omagh today, should just say, we know we've lost this battle, we're not going to win it back again. Is there any prospect of that?
Well, that still doesn't stop us from lobbying and fighting for the need of the people in West Tyrone, and the need is clear. We deserve the same level of hospital services in Omagh as the people in any other part of the province. And as an elected representative for the people of this area, that's what I will be continuing to do.
You're very much in a minority, you and indeed the Ulster Unionists in a place like Omagh, of course. Does your voice have weight in council?
Well, I think the clear indications from the election, both to Westminster and to Council today, has demonstrated that we are now the leading voice for unionism in West Tyrone. And the message has gone out clear to Sinn Féin IRA that we are here and we are here to stay. We are the only democratic party for the people of West Tyrone, for the simple fact being that we as a party do not recognise a terrorist mandate. So we are here to speak for the people, we're here to stay, and we will remain here in West Tyrone.
Mr. Buchanan, thank you very much indeed. Let's see what's happening on the figures and graphics side, Mark.
Okay, very good, Noel. Thanks very much indeed. We're just going to take a look very briefly at the situation here. Well, first of all, this is the swing between the Ulster Unionists and the DUP. It's a 6% swing across Northern Ireland with 52 of the 101 areas returned. We can show you in terms of our computer graphics a little bit later in more detail where the DUP mark are doing particularly well and where the Ulster Unionists are losing out, and see if there's a marrying of those two areas, which will be interesting to explore.
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously certain areas where that swing is far greater, as we saw in Lisbon, where it's up around the 20% mark, and then there are other areas where they've made less inroads, if you like.
Okay, here's the overall state of the parties. Just talk us through that.
Well, the DUP clearly on course to be the biggest party at local government level there. They're on 68. I think, they'd be looking to sort of top the 150 mark. They had about 130 councillors last time round. Sinn Féin in second place. We also see the Ulster Unionists and the SDLP there in third and fourth. Normally they close up the gap, but the pattern we're seeing means that certainly on the Unionist side it's very unlikely that they could close that kind of gap.
Yes, and here is the share of the first preference votes at this stage, with just a shade over half of those areas returned, 32% for the DUP, then Sinn Féin, the Ulster Unionists, the SDLP, and here is the change. Sydney, a sentence on that?
Just reflecting again on Friday, that's DUP up 8%, Ulster Unionists down 5%, and Sinn Féin up 3%, SDLP down 2%, and others are showing 4% down.
We can take a very quick look, Mark, just at some of the areas where the DUP are doing very well. This is the rise in the DUP share, and you can see Lisburn there, no surprise, is topping that table.
Yeah, well, the Donaldson effect in Lisburn, there was a lot, if you like, of Trimble-like fat in Lisbon Council for the DUP to eat into. Ards, the DUP is hoping there to get overall control of the council rather than just being the biggest party. And they're also putting on gains in North Down, even though we saw that at the Westminster level, the kind of combination of Ulster Unionists and Alliance voters held them off.
And this is where the Ulster Unionists are not doing so well, and Lisburn again tops that table. You can see Ards, Larne, Fermanagh and Strabane. We can flesh that out a little bit later in our coverage this afternoon. Lots for us to play around with over here. Noel.
Thanks very much indeed, Mark. So you can see the tally up on your screen there. There's 164 seats filled so far, and a lot more to come. 582 in all, of course, in the 26 council areas. And remember, this is the last time that we will vote for 26 councils. What the final number will be, who knows? Well, that's it for now. We will be back here on BBC One at 10 minutes to 4, right up to the national news at 6, with many more results flooding in. Join us then. See you. Bye.
The tastes of this week's Dinner Next Door are full of Eastern promise. Our hosts are Marvy from Palestine.
I think it's called tabbouleh. I helped make it earlier.
Wow!
Dig in, everybody.
And Eddie from China.
What's wrong? Are you scared?
No, it's not that. It's just...
Another 15 years, my hair would be like that. Great.
That is... Wow.
Dinner Next Door tonight at 10:45 on BBC One.
Now in BBC One Northern Ireland, Malice and Vice in Murder, She Wrote. And Jessica's got herself a fancy man.
Calling it a night, Paul. Here.
Me too. Buy a gimlet on the way out?
Don't drink gimlets anymore, Paul. They leave a bad taste. Besides, I'd assume you'd have plans with your fiancé.
I do. Later. I just thought a drink for old time's sake.
Let's stick to business, Paul. It works a lot better. Andrea has everything you ever wanted. Looks, money, and social position.
You always gave me good advice, Laura. I almost forgot. That's why I keep you around.
Is this merger thing really gonna happen, or are you just playing games again?
Hey, bet the ranch. When it does, there's a vice presidency with your name on it.
Playing in the big leagues now, Paul. I hope you've got your bases covered.
Oh, I do. I've got insurance in spades. But of course, you already know that. Close to my heart, and that's where it's gonna stay.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Quatrain, I'm sorry. Good night.
Good night.
Paul, you still here?
Yeah. I was just wrapping up, Adam.
You work too hard. Young man with a beautiful fiancée shouldn't neglect her.
I wasn't planning to.
Good. Come on, I'll walk you out.
So, Adam, what's happening with the Hong Kong merger?
Well, Brad Fillmore expects a green light from the banking committee in Washington, but I don't have to tell you, it's at a very sensitive stage.
That's what worries me.
Mr. Lee's very happy with your work on the merger, Paul, and so am I.